Um, it's funny. I at this time of year, there's always a lot of new subscribers coming in. So there's always people that go, wait, this guy cheers for more than one team. Is that weird to anybody else? Is it just me? It's why? Why does he do that? Now, growing up in the Fraser Valley in the 80s meant you either cheered for the Canucks or you cheered for a playoff team. Those two things weren't normally the same. And if the Canucks were a playoff team, they would last for about 5 minutes. So, as a kid, I thought it'd be fun to cheer for somebody who's in the playoffs, and Boston was a team I picked for many reasons, and I've talked about it before. And it was nice that they were in the East. So my thinking as a teenager was, well, they're not going to play the Canucks in the playoffs, so I don't have to worry about that natural dislike you get for a team that plays against your own team. Hi, Toronto. What's up? Because yeah, that's a big part of it. And then and that's part of the reason I really couldn't stand the Oilers by the time the '80s had finished. I cheered for them when I was a little kid, but as I got older, I'm like, you know what? They keep beating up the Canucks. This is just awful. I hate these guys. So, as a Bruins fan, I was pretty proud when 1991 rolled around. Here I am, graduating high school, feeling pretty good about things because Boston finishes 44, 24, and 12 with 100 points. They're coached by Mike Milbury. Do you know the funny thing is we talk a lot about Milbury and we can say whatever we want about him as an analyst or whatever, right? As a coach, he was pretty good. He really was. He was a pretty good coach, and I think that if not for, I think his personality causes him to not last as long as a coach as others might. But you know what? He did pretty well, and they finished number one in the East that year. So I felt good. So the Vancouver Canucks out of the playoffs. Out. I think they had 68 points that year. Boston, 100. These are my boys. So the only jersey I had at the time was like this one, just it wasn't a Brad Park. And that one's long gone. That was such a ratty jersey, but boy did I love it because I never saw another Bruins jersey in my school, and I felt pretty good. First round, Boston beats Hartford in 6. Hartford, of course, would be heartbroken and move to Carolina over it. No, that's not why they moved. And then they beat Montreal in 7. Now, beating Montreal in 7, that was kind of a big deal because what's the rule about Boston and Montreal? It's a bad matchup for Boston. But that year, it changed, and it felt like something big was going on with Boston. And I thought, you know what? These guys are winning the Stanley Cup. Then they get to round 3. Pittsburgh. Oh, we could beat Pittsburgh. That's what I said. So I was telling anybody who'd listen. Anybody talking playoffs, I'd say, you know what? Boston's beating Pittsburgh. We've got home ice advantage. We've got this. They win game 1, and they win game 2 in overtime. I couldn't be more typical fanboy at that point than I was. This team was going all the way. Because look, you got Ray Bourque leading them in scoring during the regular season. 21 goals, 73 assists. One of his best offensive seasons. Craig Janney, 26 goals, 66 assists. I did not realize that Craig Janney wasn't the hero I needed. Cam Neely, 51 goals, 40 assists, and 69 games played. Neely was playing out of his mind that year. Ken Hodge, 30 goals, 29 assists. It was not revealed yet that Ken Hodge wouldn't last very long in the NHL. Hodge played pretty darn well. Dave Christian, 32 goals, 21 assists. If you want to understand why I'm a big fan of Dave Christian, this season was it for me. He didn't last very long in Boston after that, but man, was he important during that run, both in the regular season and the playoffs. And goaltending, you want to talk about tandems, you have Andy Moog and Reggie Lemelin. The most solid 1-2 punch in the league. Very similar to what we see now with Rask and Halak. Ray Bourque in the playoffs played 19 games, had 7 goals and 18 assists for 25 points. Pretty solid appearance. Janney, again, I didn't realize yet that I wasn't going to like Craig Janney later. 18 games, 4 goals, 18 assists. Cam Neely, 19 games, 16 goals and 4 assists. 16 goals in 19 games for Cam Neely. Just think about that. Just let that sit there. Vladimir Ruzicka came out of nowhere. 17 games, 2 goals, and 11 assists. He was solid. Dave Christian, 19 games, 8 goals in those 19 games, 4 assists, 12 points. And those 8 goals all felt like key goals to me at the time. Loved the guy. but something happened during this series. So while I'm all boastful, like, oh, we're beating Pittsburgh, this series is over. There's this guy named Mario Lemieux. And I don't know if you've heard of him because I realize he's not a very well known figure in hockey. But boy, howdy, did he turn out to be pretty darn good. Pittsburgh wins game 3 4-1, and they won game 4 4-1. And what's this guy saying? We've got this. We haven't lost at home yet. Right, yeah. Game 5, they lost at home, and it was 7-2. That game is when the boastful Bruins fan died. Absolutely 100% done. There was no boasting ever again. And then in game 6, they lost 5-3. Now, how could I boast going into a series against Pittsburgh? Because Pittsburgh would win the cup, right? The thing is, Pittsburgh had missed the playoffs in 1990. They lost in the second round in 1989 to the Philadelphia Flyers. 1988, 87, and 86, they missed the playoffs. And they were seen as defensively flawed, whereas defensively, Boston had Ray Bourque, and they were fantastic. Glenn Wesley, not a bad defenseman either. But I discounted the Penguins. I discounted what the Penguins could do. Once we reached the conference finals, I was straight up telling people, yeah, they're winning the cup. It's happening. Because I really, really believed that this was the team that was going to do it. I didn't see a team left in the playoffs that could knock them out. And, I knew Minnesota was on the other side. See where I'm going with this? So I was like, all right, I'm going to get the Minnesota North Stars and the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Final, 1991. Here we come. Because, yeah, Minnesota looked pretty good. And I thought, all right, if I get Minnesota and Boston, I'm styling. And I had people in school even tell me, going, don't you like the North Stars too? And I'm like, yeah. And I'd get the odd, pick a team. But, people were like, oh, that'd be interesting if you got the North Stars and the Bruins in the final. Yep. Nope. And it's not a result of my boasting, but afterwards, I just felt like such an ass. I was like, man, I was trying to bury the Penguins, and yet the Penguins buried the Bruins. So when I do videos on this channel, and I'm complimentary of a team that's playing against a team that I cheer for, it's not for channel purposes. It's because ever since that year, ever since those playoffs, I have never once said, oh, we've got this. This series is over. We are so much better than those guys. This is ridiculous. Why are we even matched up with those guys? We're going to kill it. Because I felt awful after Game 5 in that series. And I would never want to feel that way again. And again, looking at it just through Bruins goggles, yeah, it looked really good. But looking at it from a more objective perspective, which I did after, I thought, the Penguins have Barrasso, they have Lemieux, and Jágr, whoever this kid is, pretty good team. I probably should have kept my mouth shut, and I probably should have looked realistically at the rosters and said, Pittsburgh has just as much a chance as anybody. Pittsburgh can knock off the Boston Bruins, but I didn't. I went full fanboy. So that's something I learned in that series, and I've never forgotten it. And I've never had that ego about the Canucks, because remember where I talked about earlier on that I needed a team to cheer for around here because the Canucks were always kind of bad? That's still kind of a thing. And it happens often enough that the Canucks are bad that it keeps me humble for when the Canucks are good. Because that's just sort of an issue as well. I on some level envy the fan that can just blindly say my team is the greatest, we're going to win, we're awesome, and you can go out there and scream it at the top of your lungs. I just can't. I can't do it. 2011, after they won the Stanley Cup, of course, and I've talked about this before, locally I wasn't allowed to celebrate. But also, keep in mind, the one team that they beat in the Stanley Cup final in 91 was the one I was cheering for instead of them. So I still didn't have that moment. But, I don't get cocky and arrogant over any of this stuff because it's just, I think it's a bad look when your team blows it. And certainly my team blew it in 91. And I don't care if it's 2019 now. I don't care if that was 80 years ago. But I never forget that series. And I never forget what happened. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.